Anything in any system is corruptible. The belief that this is not going to get corrupted to me is impossible. So this is kind of an impromptu podcast because last Thursday or Wednesday, you and me
spoke about planning.
had at it, and first of all, we fucking went to each other's throats and debated and discussed kind of the state of technology and its kind of role in our lives and where we're going with Web3, metaverse bullshit. But that already tells the audience where I stand. And then we got into the whole debate of, planning versus chaos, etc. But anyways, you and me had a few really interesting debates, and we realized that it might be something people are willing to kind of listen to, and I'm sure people might have opinions, because these are conversations that I have with several of my friends who, challenge each other on kind of the roles and the impact of technology in our life, right?
Yeah.
So I'll let you set it up, but
okay.
But I think the idea is we have opposing views, but as usual, we always meet somewhere down the middle. But there is this state of slight fear, I think, that we're living in, because on one side, we're excited and thrilled by what this new wave of technology is bringing. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's accelerating kind of our momentum more. It's accelerating our transition to a less physical world.
Yeah.
And pros and cons of that. But anyways, let's run through how we got here, and let's kind of agree on kind of the framework for the debate. I think is important.
Yeah. So I think how we got here, I mean, obviously both working in kind of the tech scene, like everyone that's been involved in that space, has kind of seen this transition and this rapid growth over time. But fundamentally, the philosophical part of the conversation or the debate that started the other day with you and me was really talking about that technological advancement in a decentralized world and everything that's going on within that. But the kind of decentralized piece to it really stems from the fact that we live in a very centralized world today.
Yeah.
Now, from a tech point of view, from an internet point of view, we spoke about Web 1, early 90s, really kind of like this decentralized governance, like protocols that were, created super early,
dawn of a new era.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the emergence of the internet and all of this stuff, right? Web 2, which is kind of what we've all grown up with, where we've built our careers, our businesses, and everyone's transitioned across, is really about this centralized control, which really focuses on creating shareholder value.
For a few.
Well, it's just that, in a world where, the few have kind of, used the kind of way we structure ourselves or govern ourselves to their advantage and have basically won the race. And that's like the FANG stock in effect. But to get there, there's been a lot of kind of arguably questionable things along the way, be it buying up small competition, discrediting, using that power and lobbying within kind of governments and so on and so forth. So
privacy,
exactly. All of this stuff has basically led us into a point where there is a ton of distrust. And the way that technology is now evolved is that we've in effect created a world which is, left or right. It's this way or that way. There's no real kind of middle ground, and that's ultimately the way the tech and the algorithms have worked. But if you go to the core, one of the core of the problem is that the focus is creating shareholder value, and stakeholders like ourselves, our participants, we are the product, and we don't necessarily benefit from that.
And to drive that home, I mean, you have platforms like Facebook that have what, 2 plus billion users.
Yeah, it's probably just shy of that, but it is up there. It's at least a seventh of the planet.
It's like, assumably, like, I guess 2 billion users use a platform, communicate on a platform, live on a platform, driving value towards a very proportionally small set of shareholders.
Yep.
Right. So when you think of that, so what they do to 2 billion people is solely done to bring value to a few thousand people.
Which ironically has reached or reared an ugly head this week. I mean, this will be speaking, kind of post what's happened, but the kind of with the whistleblower coming out and kind of revealing that, Facebook's, they're aware of this hate crime and the, stuff that's actually been transacted on their platform, but they have chosen either not to do much about it or they have not really taken the action that you would want. you could argue the other way in Facebook's favor and say, well, at least they were actually looking at it and studying it, because fundamentally in kind of the older world, really, it's just media companies and news stations that have been doing exactly the same thing, fueling hate and divide on both sides. So, it's easy to point the finger at big tech and say, Facebook's evil and Zuckerberg, I mean, don't trust the guy. There's no reason to. But at the same time, you have to question, whether, they're acting in bad faith or whether they are actually just an easy target. Yeah. So anyway, on the Facebook front, that's centralization. Where we're at today is this Web3 buzzword. We love buzzwords in marketing. But it's basically
branded as Web3.
Yeah, but in effect, in a nutshell, Web3 is kind of the amalgamation of Web1 and Web2. So, take the benefits of decentralization, community governance, stakeholder value, and combine that with the tech and the infrastructure of Web2, but without that centralized points of control. And that's kind of where everything is starting to, I guess, converge in the middle, which is where we're starting to see crypto. We know I'm a big fan of crypto. You're involved in the space as well. Yeah. And then other technology, other innovation technologies. So, be it AI and this stuff, it's all kind of converging at the same time. And it's almost like everything, when we're talking growth curves, everything is reaching kind of that point on its S-curve of either parabolic adoption and growth, which terrifies you, which is where this debate goes, and me to an extent, or it's just going to fall flat on its face, and we're going to continue down this path of centralization. Now, we've seen what centralization does to society in other parts of the world, whether it's right or wrong, whether you agree or not. But China's kind of that centralized state model, and we're starting to see that now spill over into places like Europe and the US. And from a Western values perspective, that goes against that belief system.
Sure. So
it's kind of social, economical, political issues converging with tech issues all at the same time. And that's why this decade is going to feel like an acceleration of chaos. But hopefully we come out at the end of it with clarity.
You know what? I think to kind of open up, I think the debate is, I just want to give context. There is not an ounce of me that believes that, decentralization or decentralized tech, society-driven, people-driven ethoses and missions, there's not a piece of me that believes that inherently as an idea is bad. I think fundamentally it's good. For the reasons that you said, states have proven to be untrustworthy, basic fundamentals of economics are being ignored and kind of have been hacked to benefit even fewer. Corruption is rampant, but with a label of democracy and transparency. So it's I think our society has gotten to an inflection point where it's okay, everything we know to be real, everything we believe to be who we are is not really what we are, and things need to change. And this whole movement towards decentralization is absolutely, I subscribe to it 100%.
Decentralization, just on that point, brings us closer to potentially truth as well, right? This validation.
Absolutely.
Rather than, having to rely on individuals or institutions to give you that
this whole blockchain, ledger, transparency, kind of decentralization kind of technology that can be applied to almost anything in our life, I think is inherently a fantastic idea, right? And I want to be clear that I don't believe anything outside of that.
One thing I will say on that, sorry, just to cut you off, but it could be inherently good unless it falls in the hands of a world where we sit at a highly centralized state. Therefore, it becomes a weapon or a tool that just increases surveillance. And that's the inflection point that we're talking about here.
And exactly. And what I want to say is, on a personal level, and quite frankly, thanks a lot to you as well. And my awareness of it, I drive it a lot to you. But my participation today is solely in kind of crypto and stuff like that. And I'll continue to do that simply because, economic systems are being cheated every day by people who govern and, treat it like monopoly.
Yep.
And so my quick adoption of this new tech is not driven solely by the new tech. It's driven by the distrust of the old systems, right? And so I think where I stand when it comes to this is that if the adoption of this new tech was solely driven by, trying to find a kind of perfect solution to our societal issues, then I would say, yeah, I mean, I would have no hesitation. Yeah. The reality is I find it very, very difficult to believe that just because something is new and shiny and we believe it to be perfect and it to be the solution to the problem, to me, I always feel like we're solving symptoms rather than solving kind of the core issues, right? And so corruption, misgovernance, ego, selfishness, all these bad traits that humans unfortunately have and we'll never rid of, these things are going to prevail. They're going to continue. They're going to scale, right? And to me, we're not solving that, right? And there's a part of me that's really scared because yes, let's adopt it. Let's have that transparency. Let's have those ledger systems. Let's decentralize everything. Let everything be tracked and monitored and managed and whatever. But like you said, I think if you give it to the wrong person in the wrong hands, if you give some sort of a leg up to, states that are quite centralized in their thinking, the adoption of it could send us backwards light years, right? Yeah. On one hand. The other thing I want to say before I kind of open up to the debate is I also feel as I have these conversations that my position might be absolutely correlating with my midlife kind of crisis. And that midlife crisis is the following. I'm a dad.
Being a dad is not a crisis?
No, hold on. I mean, like it's that change in life, right? Yeah. It's that maturity. It's that protectionism, right? That comes with that space. So being a dad is not a crisis, but having to think as a father is, right? And so today I look at the world and I say, okay, how did I grow up? What did I love? What were the best moments of my life? And then I think about my daughter and where in the world she's going to grow up in. And then I think about, okay, I want to have the best of my life and none of the bad and a lot of new that just expand on the good, right?
It's totally unrealistic, but I appreciate
but that's what you always aim for, right? And so for me, a lot of my position today is in fear of us regressing as a society because I believe human society thrives on connections, right? On real human relationships and connections. We are social beings, right? And so we only exist today and we only wake up and are excited for our days based on social relationships. Right? We don't wake up, and say, oh, I want to build a microphone. No, we wake up because we have a business objective that will drive a social recognition, right? Whether it's I get paid for it or I get clapped for and say, oh, this man is great. He's a great entrepreneur. Yep. Or because I want to see my friend or my wife or my daughter and I want to get a hug or I want to get some affection from them. So we are social beings. Inherently, we need that. Everything we do is based on some social objective, right? And for me, as this technology gets implemented in our lives, and I'm starting to see like this whole metaverse, NFT, I don't know what, and I'm starting to see us deviate from real social, physical interactions to a digital world, it scares the shit out of me.
But we're already there.
I know. And that's why for me, I'm saying it's a midlife crisis because part of me is like, maybe I'm getting to the age and to the place in my life where I'm no longer as in touch as I think I am. And maybe my way of thinking is now so outdated, just the way we used to look at our parents when we were teenagers, right? I'm thinking maybe that's part of it. It's that self-realization as well. But also I still stand firm on the fact that I don't believe that a digital social experience could ever replace a physical one.
No, and I mean, I guess I'll come back to your first point, but let me talk about that second kind of bracket. Like today's world, we live in a digital world. Like be it, we just spoke about Web 2.0, right? So we've grown up, you spend more time on your phone, on social platforms, that whole social connection thing. I mean, even, we did podcasts.
I would say we live in a hybrid world. I wouldn't say we live in a digital world.
I mean, you actually, if you look at some of the data as to how long you spend actually in the digital
Especially
world.
Especially with COVID, yes. You could probably argue that we spend more time online than we do physical.
But even before COVID, like, the amount of time that you spend on a digital world versus a physical world is actually pretty high as a percentage from your awake time.
Sure,
Be it on a laptop, be
proportionally,
it on...
Proportionally, yeah.
So it's still there. Now, how much time we're spending as people on social platforms, what are we looking at on social platforms? That endless scroll, kind of that mind-numbing dopamine hit that, the social networks managed to figure out that, it can keep you hooked for longer and longer. That's the path that we're on today. So regardless of whether we believe in that or we want to break away from that we're going to continue on that in that world. Now, how much we govern it and how much you want to try and encourage like kids or whatever to spend outside of that, kind of down to the individual parents and that freedom of choice that you have. The whole kind of shift into what you're talking about with metaverse and NFTs, I mean, this is this kind of separate breakaway of kind of, this whole crypto space that's been kind of going on. Now, that digital world is really about creating or adding value back to the people that contribute into that. So that's like the community governance aspect of, a digital world. So again, rather than, for example, rather than going into, creating some art, I mean, NFTs are a good example. Rather than creating art and then that go into a platform or someone, a music artist, go into Spotify and, being paid a few thousand for 1 million downloads. Instead, they can create an NFT out of that and then give that to the community and actually retain that value themselves. Same as artists. So it's about creating that value there. And we'll come on to the whole economic, like, why is that got to be the thing that drives it in a second. But the first part of what you said around corruption and like human nature, I think this is where the debate sits in the world of crypto.
Yeah.
Bitcoin versus everything else. And, myself is, super pro Bitcoin because we're trying to fix the base layer of the system. The base layer of the system is money. That's where it's corrupted.
Yeah.
So if the base layer of the system is corrupted globally, which money is based on the way that we operate today, then inherently everything built on top of that is corruptible. Add on top of that humans who seek to better themselves through greed and added layers of corruption. It's just a kind of a death spiral that we find ourselves in. Now, that's why when you look at Bitcoin, you say, well, what does Bitcoin do? Bitcoin can fix the base layer of money, being a decentralized protocol that is incorruptible. It's fixed in supply. The rules of the game can't be changed. And on top of that, you then have the network, which, where things get built on. So that's the idealistic world of where things get built.
How is that any different than the gold standard?
It's similar to the gold standard, but the difference is with Bitcoin and gold is that, the way that gold has kind of like moved or changed. We depegged from gold in the 70s. And by depegging from the gold standard, actually having that hard asset behind it, like we in effect.
But do we really believe that will never happen? That Bitcoin, the rules of the game of Bitcoin, the principles will never be changed?
Well, they can't because, they can be changed providing you get a 51 consensus of the network.
Which is likely.
It's unlikely given how decentralized so if you own part of a Bitcoin and you're part of that, or you run on a node, you're part of that network. So to get anything changed on that network, you need consensus above 50% of that network, so the operators. So Taproot was something that got activated earlier this year, and that's because there was the consensus in the network that this is a good upgrade for the system. Whereas with the gold standard, when we had the gold standard, and money was pegged to gold, there was a group of people in the Nixon era, I think, that went into a hotel room and decided that actually we're going to depeg from this and we're going to, create more value out of thin air, and then we're going to leverage that out. So, and they could do that because they had the majority of the gold to then be able to then make that decision. Whereas that doesn't really exist within the Bitcoin network.
But in theory, it could, right? And that's where...
In theory, it could. In theory. The likelihood of it is much less.
No, I'm totally conscious of that. But I think this is where I lose my distrust in some of these things, even though I believe it's the right direction, right? It's like... I feel like every generation sits there and says, man, our parents or our grandparents, they did things a certain way. We're smarter, we're better, we're more socially aware, we're more woke. We know better than everybody else. We've invented new innovations that are going to change the world for the better. And the guys before us did their best, but, we're light years ahead of them. We know better. Mm-hmm. And then inevitably, human greed comes in. Web 2, whatever we wanted to call it,
It's just the internet of what we know.
Google, Facebook, all these guys, like, they were rock stars. They're still rock stars. We look up to them. We idolize them as societies. We see Jeff Bezos. Oh my God, he's worth $1 trillion or whatever it is, right? We're just mesmerized by these people. But inherently, they're just, founders and CEOs of extremely wealthy organizations that have driven capitalism to its brink and made people consume 100 times more than what they need, right? I mean, and we celebrate that, and I think, fantastic entrepreneurs, fantastic businessmen, but inherently they've benefited from a system that is that was built for this hyper consumption rather than for the improvement of society. And all I'm saying is, like, we've idolized, a certain way of doing things, and now we're going to idolize this new way of doing things, and whoever the founder is of Bitcoin and stuff like that. But
group of
but I mean, the challenge that I see is I'm just so hesitant to kind of rally in a new era of innovation of us who know better and this is uncorruptible, etc. Because I just don't believe that anymore. I just think anything in any system is corruptible. The belief that this is not going to get corrupted to me is impossible. There's always going to be someone willing to do it. Always going to be a nation, an empire, a powerful state that's going to decide that this doesn't work for them anymore.
So just on that, when you talk about the what is corruptible, this is where that debate sits within cryptocurrencies that are centralized or have too much control. So you've got proof of work, which is where Bitcoin sits, and that's where you have to expend energy, solve mathematical problems.
Sure.
Right, so to harden the network, and that's the reason that is in place, and proof of work is there, is from a security point of view, right? To prevent such a thing. Then you have proof of stake, which is pretty much what we have today, and that's where Ethereum and some of the other cryptocurrencies sit, and that ultimately gives a group of people control. So you would imagine that if you're a government or a bank, you would lean more towards proof of stake because, wow, that's something that I could potentially corrupt in the future. So yes, that is the debate.
And it looks really familiar.
And it looks really familiar to me. And there's a path for me to take more control of that system. So if I'm able to take more control of that system, I'm able to have more influence over what happens in the future. That's the problem. And that's really where Bitcoiners sit and say, absolutely not. We cannot allow that because history has shown us how bad that is, and everything else sits. So that's where you get the max in this kind of debate online. The whole thing around, not being able to trust that humans will inherently create this kind of issue is an interesting one, because on the path that we're on today in society, no matter what, if we carry on down this path, then we are basically moving towards a world which is highly centralized, highly regulated, highly surveilled, and highly corruptible, with the power in the hands of a few. Me, as a Westerner who does believe in Western values, whether they are fluff or whether they are actually true, believes in a world that we can actually try to do something a bit different that's better. And if we don't try, and we don't look and try to create something that could improve on the existing system, then we have failed the future generations that we will bring into the world, and hand them over a planet and a society that is kind of surrounded with corruption and angst and hate and control and surveillance, along with pollution and issues within, kind of the climate itself, versus can we do something over here to try and rectify and, innovate our way out of what really is quite a dangerous path.
I don't disagree with that. I think as a statement, no one would have an argument against that. I think what I'm saying is, I guess I should ask the question, are you not, fearful of a world where the acceleration of this type of technology adoption in our lives, and all the ancillary or kind of related kind of, industries, be it, the world of NFTs, the world of, metaverse universes and stuff like that, don't you fear a world where our actual realities become so distant from us that it becomes unhealthy?
Totally. Like actually fear and being slightly terrified by the speed of change and acceleration of this is pretty much where I think most people sit. Even if you know, even if I fully believe in kind of like the innovations in the space and what we're trying to achieve, I think like my kind of anxiety from that is that technology is making everything move way too quickly. And we're at a point where that's accelerating too fast for the human brain to kind of compute and really keep up with. On top of that, we have an existing kind of system that's creaking around the edges, and we have political unrest, we have media storms. I mean, the media is just a barrage of negativity and hate. So it's coming, and it's almost coming maybe too quickly for humans to really kind of process and create a world without mistakes.
Yeah, because
now the mistakes are going to happen, and they already do happen. So
no, but I would say further that and sorry, I think what I'm saying is we are acknowledging that with the adoption of this tech, the knock-on effects are we live much more digital lives.
Yes.
It's not just a transaction and currency and trading thing. It's like a full end-to-end impact on our lives, on everything that we do, right? And so we know that with the acceleration of crypto comes, NFTs, comes any other kind of innovations that build on the back of that. We know that our lives are going to be way more digital. And so what I think, to articulate it properly, I'm beginning to see a world where even though the idea is to push truth and transparency at the front of the agenda, we end up living worlds on digital platforms and digital worlds where we don't know what's real anymore anyway. So with the exception of being able to track, economics of things, the world that we're going to live in is going to be a digital world where real and digital, true or false, verified or unverified, in terms of
So I think on living in that digital world. So again, we're in a digital world today, right? If we're going to choose about what's real and what's not, that's where we have a problem in society, right? Sure. When you think of, the basic function of NFT is basically a non-fungible token. In other words, it's unique, that lives on a ledger, i.e. the blockchain, and is verified in its ownership. So whatever that is today, the application of that is, pieces of art, JPEGs, punks, whatever it is, that's kind of like proof of concept. In the future, that's going to be brands, that's going to be, music, that's going to be, parts of culture, that's going to be, whatever we want it to be. So the kind of proof of concept as to what it is today, when we see all these kind of weird JPEGs that are selling for millions, and it is a bubble. But the underlying application of it can be hugely transformative. So when we try to understand what's real and what's not, yes, if we're in a digital world and we're split and we're in the metaverse, we have our goggles on, and it's like, what's the film, like Ready Player One, and we're sitting there and the physical world is burned down around us, but it doesn't matter because the digital world's amazing. Of course, that's a failure of society in general. But if we're in a world where actually we've reduced our consumption in the physical world and we've been able to transition our energy usage in a way that means that we are no longer heating the planet or contributing to issues within society, and we're exerting our energy into a digital world that rewards us or rewards the community for their input as opposed to just rewarding a few shareholders, then I would say that's a potentially good application and something that we could work towards that could better society overall. Now, does that mean that I want my kids, your kids, like just spending their whole time in a digital world with goggles on? No, not really. But I can educate them in a way and try to, help guide them to the benefits of living in the physical world and experiencing that for what we did. But I also believe in having that freedom of choice, and I will pass on my experience and my knowledge, but it's up to them at the end of the day as to what they choose to do.
But it's not.
But it is.
If society lives online, how do they choose?
Because if society is fully online, then again, that's a failure of society overall.
But that's where we're going.
Not necessarily. That is a problem statement and something that we need to be consciously aware of. But that's not necessarily where we're going. So 100%
let's go a bit like head in the sky, be a bit meta, and not have any substantiated data. But let's just have the debate.
Sure.
So where we are today, this hybrid life of in and out, half and half, whatever you want to call, and a world where we have some sort of digital kind of, lives with social media, and there are even networks,
Yep.
multiple networks out there that we live on today, whether it's
Yep.
e-commerce marketplaces, social media platforms, Fortnite for the kids, whatever it is. It's like these network kind of worlds that we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
Already, we're seeing that the general implications of that for human health
Yep.
are generally negative. To me, maybe if you want to argue otherwise, I'm happy, but for me, they're generally negative, right?
No,
so
I
on
think
the
it's a
human
valid
happiness
concern.
scale,
Yeah.
like the value they might have brought to our lives. Okay, we consume, we have more stuff. Okay, great, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're healthier. It actually means that, we're continuously going after like, what do you call impulse or endorphins or whatever the hell you
Oh,
call
the
them.
dopamine.
Dopamine hits,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're constantly going after dopamine hits because we're just totally depressed with what we have or don't have. We're, seeking engagement and reactions from people our entire life. How many likes did I get? How many views did I get? We're like living in a vanity world.
So you're describing today, yeah?
Today, yeah. I have friends that live in my compound. Their kids, they get extremely depressed if their Fortnite avatar doesn't have the newest t-shirt or clothing or swag or weapon or whatever that they can buy online, because then their friends are going to make fun of them because their avatar is out of date.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So where the applications of where we are today in this arguably kind of, much more simple version of the internet versus where we're going, the applications so far don't seem to have brought us any lasting happiness as a society.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And I would say, contrarily, it's kind of maybe accelerated kind of our unhappiness as a society, right?
Maybe,
it's eroded democracy. It's kind of eroded social engagements and interactions. It's broken down relationships, etc. And it's made social life just very, very difficult, and happiness and depression and things is more rampant than it's ever been. When I think about this metaverse future world state that we're going towards, which seems to be inevitable at this point anyway, I only see the acceleration of the bad, right? And I don't see the counter culture to give us the balance that you're talking about, where our kids will say, oh, I can be this, or I can be that, or I can do a bit of this or a bit of that. I don't see that anymore. I see that everything is moving towards that.
Yeah, so I think it's a valid point, but what you described today, so let's take away, let's say, Web3 doesn't exist, crypto doesn't exist, that world doesn't exist, right? The world today, what you described sounds pretty shitty, right? Like we've accelerated our unhappiness.
Yeah.
I'm more upset that, I don't have the latest weapon or costume in Fortnite than I am of like, friends going somewhere else.
And side note to that, like we also have statistics, like we work with our partners at the UNHCR. We have statistics that show that disparity between rich and poor is the biggest it's ever been. There's so many things, that have accelerated that because of shareholder value focuses. And yes, decentralization, all these things will in theory balance out the equation, right? And we're starting to see it in countries like Venezuela, and we're starting to see them empowered and being able to restructure their economies because of that. But generally speaking, I'm not confident.
And look, I think the reason I was trying to frame where you see the world today and that path, if we remove everything else here, right, that is a pretty bleak path that is only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm an optimist. Like, I like to think that there are different ways of trying to fix things. I don't believe that trying to fix the environment today is a case of everyone should use less plastic, everyone should switch off fossil fuels, because it's going to destroy human society and progress. It's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
Do I believe that we need to do more and we have to kind of change the way that we think about things, and can we change that with how we use technology? Yes, I think we can, and I think we have to try to transition to that. Do I think that we have a complete imbalance of rich and poor today? I think it's quite clear that in society we do. I, as someone who has benefited significantly from the system today, be it where I was born, color of my skin, being a male, and actually like being able to benefit from that system, right? So, there are people who have benefited and then people who have not. What does, an application of decentralization do? What does, something like Bitcoin do that removes state control from money? Does it create or give an opportunity of a fairer, more equal society? It does. It's a wealth redistribution that could take place. These are all opportunities that sit kind of over there today. I think if we take what we're trying to do or what the world is trying to do when it comes to technology and say, okay, we've got the crossover of politics, social issues, technology, all converging onto this single point. If we stay the course, then we know the outcome. The outcome is very clear. We're going to have runaway kind of, whether it's inflation or deflation, whichever one, I mean, probably inflation first, then deflation afterwards, because tech is inherently making everything deflate.
Sure.
We're going to have bigger rich-poor divides in society. We're going to have wider energy and environmental issues than we have today. And we're probably going to have more and more social unrest and spend more time in a kind of like robotic state of Facebook and Twitter and TikTok. And that's just the way the world's going to go. Or we can try and innovate our way out of that and allow ourselves to build out something that changes the way that works. Obviously, we're still going to have a lot of online time and digital time. And that might mean that there is, you know, your kids, my kids spend 50, 60% of their time in that digital world and that metaverse. Who are we to judge whether that's right or wrong in the world that they're raised in? I mean, we're just parents at the end of the day. I spent part of my youth in like on computer games, but I also spent part of my youth throwing tennis balls at curbs for hours at a time.
Yeah.
Right? Was that right? Was that wrong? I don't know. Did I turn out all right? Have I built and progressed? Have I provided and contributed in society? Yes, I have. So I think the way that the world switches and shifts is really kind of up to the people that are in control of it at that period of time. And I think we have to look at what the options are on the table. Do we have an opportunity to build something that tries to fix and rectify the issues of what we've created today and what we've contributed to in society? Or do we just allow that to continue to fester and then allow a certain few, be it the FANG companies or states, to then decide and navigate that path for us? I personally, I'm not going to opt for that. I'm opting.
Yeah,
for this
and I don't opt for that either. I don't opt for the world that we're in today. Like I don't suggest that that's the solution. I just, a part of me,
the fear that you have is correct.
I think my conclusion and the fear that I have is basically wondering, should there not be basic principles put in place?
Yeah. So
because you know the question of we should let people decide, and it's up to the society at that time to decide what is good or bad or what they want or what they deem as the right way to live or not. Okay, like generally, of course, like people should have their own choices in their own kind of environments, right? But it doesn't stop or negate the fact that the reality is we are social beings, we are physical beings, we are built in a way through evolution, you know, that we need social interactions.
Yeah.
And the belief that can be replaced or substituted by digital interactions could be true.
I don't think anyone is saying that we replace those physical interactions 100% with pure digital interactions.
Sure, but whatever their position is, the reality is life will incorporate more and more digital engagements, right?
And don't both roads lead us there today, unless you unplug the internet? Potentially.
But what I'm saying is I actually agree that we need to move forward with this kind of innovation that we're kind of adopting. What I'm wondering is there not a place is there not any room for kind of protective barriers of how we can protect us as a species so that happiness is actually the outcome and not just stable societies?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a fair debate, which you could take
online. Yeah, it's crazy. Like you're starting to see, you know, lots of brands, lots of tech companies, lots of states invest pour innovation and resources into this new world.
Yeah.
Right? And it just seems a bit kamikaze in how we're adopting it. It kind of looks like, okay, the ship is burning. Everyone jump in this new ocean with your eyes closed, and hopefully there are no sharks in that water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, and it just feels a bit kind of
so I think that
ignorant, you know. I just feel it just.
But I think that, I mean, and that's the thing with, it's the beauty of kind of what you're seeing within, you know, some of the crypto projects outside of kind of the Bitcoin network today. You're seeing developers, builders, engineers come together globally from all over the world and test different applications of these protocols, be it through decentralized finance, DeFi, NFTs, the metaverse, social community tokens, like all of these different applications and trial and error. Some of these are going to fail, and most of them are probably going to fail and fall on their ass. But that, if you remember in the the 90s or the early 2000s when the .com bubble eventually burst, what was born out of that? It was the strongest that survived. Now we look back today and we're like, well, actually that really led us down a path of kind of central chaos, which is where we sit. But the world that will get born out and kind of flushed out in a free market where the market decides, not where Zuckerberg decides, not where the president of the United States decides, not where a centralized state in China decides. The free market will decide what's right. And with a free market, you have a community of people, of stakeholders, not shareholders. You own a stake in whatever token or whatever product or protocol you're using. You get to decide the outcome, whether that is a success or failure, whether that is going to be beneficial longer term. And that's why any of this stuff that's developed today, it feels like it's happening at an insane speed, kamikaze-esque. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is kamikaze-esque. But really, we're not going to see the true potential or true outcome of all of this stuff probably for another 10, 20 years. And we might sit here in 10, 20 years, you and I, hopefully retired. Maybe we'll be in like Bermuda or something. But we will
the
look
one
back.
place where there's no internet.
Exactly. We will look back. No, because the internet will just be in our heads by that point.
Yeah, true.
But we will look back and we will assess kind of, what happened over the last 20 years. And for me, like I've said, and I've said it numerous times, the path that we're on around this kind of like acceleration of centralized, Facebook-led, Amazon, Google, state-controlled world, I think is a very treacherous path for society if we don't step back and go back to what our values are from a human perspective and social perspective, and try to build something that's more fair, equal, and inclusive to all.
So hypothetically, and I know we're over time, and I want to try to keep this one short, but hypothetically, do you genuinely believe, is it in your vision that this new world would in theory also reduce per capita consumption?
Yes.
On the premise that consumption will stay the same, but it'll be a higher proportion of digital consumption to physical consumption, inherently meaning better for the planet?
Yep. Absolutely.
And would you then not argue, because a part of me believes, and I think we spoke about this a couple times, all we do today is consume. Everything is disposable. Nothing is of any value. Nothing.
I mean, in our lifetime, within the last 20 years,
like, I'm just going to go through it just so people understand what we say, because I say this to literally everyone I see these days. Everything we consume today is disposable. All senses. Mm-hmm. You open social media, content, entertainment is just disposable. You don't even remember what you saw 5 seconds ago. It's like a zombie. Mm-hmm. No matter what platform, Instagram, TikTok, fucking Facebook, it's just garbage. Your eyes and ears are just garbage. You don't know what the fuck happened. You just lost 2 hours of your life. Disposable entertainment. Yep. Nothing of value. Nothing changed your life. Nothing impacted you. Nothing education. There's no education, information. Bleh, right? Garbage. Then you want to order food. And sort by promo, or sort by a fastest delivery, or sort by fucking burger. Right? And you just eat anything. Another cloud kitchen with its 100 ingredients mixed in 42 different ways gives you 42 different brands of restaurants, but all the same garbage. What you put in your body today is disposable garbage, right? It's just the same ingredients remixed a different way with a new brand. Just eat, quick, consume. It's just fuel. So even when you're eating, it's like disposable garbage, right? In and out, fucking garbage. No value, no nutritious value. You don't even enjoy food anymore. You don't enjoy food. It's just like you don't even know what the fuck you're eating, right? Then you go to fucking Netflix. You don't even know what the fuck to. Everything's garbage. Nothing is of any value, right?
Other than Squid Games, sponsored.
Squid Games is actually pretty good, but it's just fucking garbage too, right? It's like it's just nothing of value. Like even now, you search by critically acclaimed because you want to see something that's good. Maybe critically acclaimed as a fucking,
or sort by what's most viewed in the UAE. What is the herd watching that I can watch?
Yeah. It's everything like force feeding disposable content, right? Mm-hmm. And then you open Rami or Spotify, and it's like you don't even search albums or artists. You search fucking moods. I want to be happy. I want to work out. You don't even know what the fuck you're listening to. You have no appreciation for the music. It's
Okay.
just a playlist.
So everyone knows that we overconsume.
Right?
Where you
So
going with
it's
that?
just my point is I walk in my closet, I have 100 pairs of shoes. I look in my closet, I have 100 shirts. I open my phone, I don't know what the fuck I'm listening to, I'm just listening. I don't know what I'm eating, I'm just eating. I don't know. Everything is just based on consumption. Now, isn't the argument possible that yes, we're going to consume more digitally, but the rate of consumption is going to be equally increased? Right? So yeah, maybe we buy one less sneaker, two less t-shirts, five less whatever they are, but the rate of consumption will be higher. So yes, I'll have 5,000 t-shirts instead of 100 t-shirts. I'll have 4,000 pairs of shoes because they only cost 92 cents per pair instead of fucking $200 a pair.
But let's differentiate here. We're talking about consumption. When I say consumption reduced in a physical world. So yeah, you've got 100. I don't know why you've got 100 pairs of shoes, but if you've got 100 pairs of shoes,
Don't judge me. But all I'm saying
but
is,
less in that world. Whereas in a digital world, fine, you might have an avatar. You might consume.
but in
more
the
within
world
that.
of human happiness.
Fine, in the world of human
In
happiness.
the world of human happiness, that's what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Forget, like I have great empathy for the environment and climate change. That's a different topic. But in the world of human happiness, value to the human life, we might consume less physically, but overall we're consuming more.
Why are we consuming so much in a physical world today?
Why?
No, but do you know why you consume so much? Like you have it
Because of shareholder value. Marketing has gotten
Exactly.
amazing. I've been able to sell anything to anyone.
Of course,
we
so
do it. That's
it's
what we
just
do for a living.
I know we do. So it's like an explosion of, you've got to have the latest trends, and just this overload of stuff that gets pushed to you.
The human psyche has been hacked.
Yeah. So
Right? So how does that change in the digital world?
so the human psyche has been completely hacked in the sense of we need to consume more.
Yeah.
But you have to almost go back to the way that the system and our economy is set up. If you want to try to fix overconsumption, we base
Fix
consumption.
incentives and then incentives.
No,
will change the world.
exactly. So, when it comes to money, right? Money is printed out of thin air today and just increases in value more and more and more. And that inflates the prices of everything. And also it brings, some prices down. We then spend more and more. So we're consuming more that we don't even need, right? Now,
So we're
the economy is measured.
So just to understand that point, so we're disproportionately spending to our capability because of the way the
We
economics.
don't need to spend as much as
No.
we
So what
do,
you're
yeah.
saying is so what you're saying, just to make sure I understand and for people listening to it. So what you're saying is one of the reasons why we consume so much, beyond human psyche hacking and branding and marketing destroying people and targeting and lookalikes and all this bullshit, is the fact that the economics are unreal.
Yeah,
We don't understand proportionally what we can or cannot afford.
Exactly.
And as a society, because the economic system has been kind of flawed, we believe we have the ability to have this much consumption, and so that's what we do.
exactly.
But if the economics were designed appropriately, we wouldn't have that purchasing power.
It's not about purchasing power, but it's also incentives. You said
Or
it just
disposable.
you said it yourself, like about incentives. Like we measure success in an economy by GDP and growth, right?
Yeah.
And to achieve that, we need to grow and produce. But we don't tax consumption. We don't penalize. We actually reward consumption,
But how does that change?
right? So, I mean, in a digital and physical world,
It doesn't.
it doesn't necessarily. But it depends on what problem we're trying to solve for.
What I was trying to say, the problem that we're solving for is human happiness. And to me,
Okay,
that
hold
needs to be the
on.
objective.
Human happiness. I can't solve for human
No,
happiness.
but what I'm saying, and no, this is my fear inherently,
Go
right?
ahead.
So I think this conversation stems from the fear that let's all run and jump onto this digital sailboat that's going to save the world, it's going to save our economic system, it's going to save our governing systems, it's going to save our social interactions, it's going to bring transparency and trust back into the system. But inherently, it's also going to, I believe, it's going to make us consume 10 times more. And at the end of the day, if we're not solving for the well-being of society, the happiness of society, not the perceived fiction of having stuff equals success, right?
You need to define happiness before we try to fix happiness. What are you defining happiness as? The
best definition-
We'll have to split this podcast into like
Into two parts. But the best definition I heard recently was the successful pursuit of a great ideal is happiness. So if you believe that there is something that you really want to achieve in your life and you're slowly achieving it, that is happiness.
Okay.
Whatever that genuinely good ideal is. It can't be I want to be I want to have $100 million. You know what I mean?
So,
But like for example, one of my ultimate ideals and goals is to have the most amazing relationship with my daughter. That is one of my ultimate like goals in life.
and what if your daughter grows up and one of her idealistic like happiness pursuits is that she wants to be an architect in a metaverse where she builds and supports digital businesses to design art galleries?
Then I raised her wrong. No, but I see your point.
That's why I'm saying define happiness.
I see your point, but I think what I'm saying is today we're consuming more than we need because we believe consumption or having shit equals success or equals happiness because it's a dopamine hit that we've been taught to believe is good.
There is that. We've been conditioned in that way, but also society's model are like the base layer of society is governed and built that way to incentivize it. So if we're solving for happiness, then that's a whole different philosophical debate that we can get into around what define happiness and what is happiness for you versus me versus young people.
I understand it's a completely different topic.
When it comes to consumption, my kind of point of view here is, and I guess people can comment on this and decide if that's like valid or not. My point of view is that we have a couple of issues. We have an economic system and a model that is built and governed to deflate the value of your cash, which ensures that you spend it, which means you overconsume what you need because you're worried about your savings losing value. So the economic incentives in the world are completely wrong. Bitcoin only flips that on its head and changes that reward system and that incentive model. When it comes to consumption itself, I think if you change that and you if you go from a physical world and a digital world, if you can pivot, if we stay on that same economic incentive system, we need to try to consume more in a digital world that doesn't impact the environment so much. And if we can transition from that, that means we can continue growing, our economic model and our growth and our path and what we deem successful so that countries and families and people like prosper in a digital world that doesn't have such a bad impact on the planet, and try to step that away while we figure out what's going on in that physical world. Now, I don't have all the answers, but that's where my kind of starting hypothesis is, that these are the decisions that we have to try to come to some form of agreement on as we progress through this decade and the one after that.
No, I agree with you on that. I think the last question I would ask is this. And I'm not good at economics in general, so forgive my ignorance, but can we not argue that the digital kind of interaction or digital kind of implementation into our lives more and more accelerates consumption in the form of more for less? Right? So I'm going to consume more and it'll cost me less and the impact will be less.
So that's deflationary, right? Which is what technology is technically doing today, period.
Right?
But our economy doesn't.
That's accelerated in theory with the more we become digital beings, right?
True, but the economics of the way that we run our system today doesn't allow for those deflationary effects to take place. It just means that we consume more for less physically.
Yes.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, if we move to digital, that reality becomes really a kind of inevitable. I can consume more for less.
Yes.
Right? Not physical, but more digital for less. Already we're seeing the reality of that with Fortnite.
Sure.
Right? So I can buy a t-shirt for a few cents, right? But
so more for less, but that's carry on with your point.
Right? So, and we also understand that the only way society, the planet, progress, innovation, stability remains is with continued growth.
Yep.
Right? If you don't grow economically.
Define grow, though.
I mean, today we measure by GDP, but in theory, we need to grow. Like, the population is increasing, country economies need to continue growing to sustain its people, et cetera, to provide a lifestyle and a basis of life, right? Yeah. Basically. So technology, in theory, does more for less. In theory, wouldn't you also believe or argue that the solution to moving forward would be less for more? Just as a theory.
Yeah.
Right? So if I consume less and it costs me more, so inflation.
It's either inflation or it's like taxing consumption.
Or taxing consumption.
Yeah.
That inevitably becomes the only way you can withhold the fears.
Yeah, but I think that's like, so that is one way, but I mean, if we think about how, that's probably it's not practical in the world, right?
It's not practical,
like,
but if you do it within a
framework.
That actually allows kind of reason and for the benefit of society, not governments or states or...
Because it would probably be, for that to be practical, it'd have to be tiered. Right, so if the problem statement is the planet,
taxes.
If the problem statement is that the planet is burning and overheating, and we need to solve for, too much physical consumption,
like the carbon tax,
right? Then we have to tax things that are actually having a huge impact on the planet, and therefore that reduces the consumption of that, while increasing the costs on other things that are less kind of impactful on the planet. But that's a way of keeping economic growth stabilized in a certain way. So that could be, whether, I don't know, it'd be very hard to do it in kind of digital world to an extent, but even in that physical world, like how could you get that balance? I mean, it's a huge debate that even I wouldn't even be able to go into the...
And I guess and I don't think there's a conclusion to this conversation, but I guess the ultimate, I think, I can't wait to see the implications of this in our world is when we're able to use these ledger, blockchain, decentralized tech to do that.
Yeah.
To find a way to protect our society, our planet, our environment, our well-being, our social engagements. I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, and right? I think that's 100% agree. I think that's like one step at a time of what this technology can enable. If we know today that the base layer of society and the system is corrupted. Money's corrupted, therefore everything on top of it is. We need to, if we can solve for that, and then we start thinking about, okay, how do we want to use this technology to, bring more equality to the world, bring truth or some form of verification to the world, then we can start doing that. But, that's the type of progress and steps that when you talk about speed and this kind of like chaotic kamikaze world that we're in, these are the type of steps, these slow but steady, methodical steps where a community of people globally that isn't just, a few, are trying to think about and change. Because if we go down that path, then society overall we will solve for the kind of the errors of the past or the break where things are breaking in society.
Yeah.
And I think doing that in a very kind of fair, decentralized, community governed way is probably the best way, or gives us the best chance to make decisions that are right for humanity's progress, not shareholder progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good.
Cool. That's super long.
And just to finish, Bitcoin to 100,000.
Bitcoin to the moon.
Bitcoin to the moon. Anyways, all right, cool.
Cool.
Thanks. Good conversation. I hope people enjoyed it, and ignore...
hey, we don't have all the answers either. Like, I would be super fascinated for people to like
ignorance and my ignorance. But I hope people also have these sorts of discussions, because it is a time when a lot of change is coming.
Yeah, it's happening now.
Anyway, so thanks for listening.
Cheers.